Welcome to the Mayo Clinic Human Optimization Project, where we're creating the blueprint to help you become the best human you can be. I'm your guide and fellow optimizer, Christopher Camp. As the demands of our personal and professional lives continue to climb, we're feeling the pressure to do more and more just to keep up. As a result of that, many of us are feeling overwhelmed, and it can be increasingly difficult to find the joy and happiness in everyday life. This has to change. Life is too short. The title for our session today is Moving from Stress to Joy: How to Cultivate Happiness and Joy at Home and Work. Our guest to help us talk through this today is Dr. Daryl Chutka. Daryl, welcome to the program.
Thank you, Chris.
Dr. Chutka is the first fellowship trained geriatrician at the Mayo Clinic, and he developed an accredited geriatric fellowship at Mayo Clinic. He taught physical exam and communication at Mayo Medical School for 40 years, and he teaches provider patient communication skills and professionalism to new Mayo staff. He is the host of the Mayo Clinic Talks podcast with over 4.5 million downloads and listens. He's a previous course chair for numerous Mayo CME courses and is the past associate dean for the Mayo Clinic School of Continuous Professional Development. He's currently working in general internal medicine. He has a passion for education, broadcasting, and humor. He's an incredibly accomplished man. He may not know it yet, but his greatest accomplishment is actually teaching me how to do the general medical physical exam about 20 years ago. Today, with Dr. Chutka, we're going to work through three big questions. The first one we're going to try to tackle: how do you define joy and happiness, and how do they play a role in our everyday lives? The second big question: why do so many of us struggle with finding joy in our lives, and how is that impacting us? And then the third question we're going to tackle: how can we intentionally design our lives and work to experience more joy and make joy our default? Daryl, does that sound okay to you?
It sure does, Chris. I have to tell you, it's a lot easier being on that other end of the microphone than this one. So we'll see how this goes.
Well, just like I had you teach me the physical exam 20 years ago, you're going to have to teach me everything you know about podcasting as well.
All
So,
right.
new territory for me, but it's a true honor to have you on the show here.
Well, thank you so much.
So, let's start with some definitions. So,
Okay.
first, how do you define joy or happiness?
Well, I don't look at them as equal. I think happiness is part of joy, but I see joy as more happiness on steroids. I look at joy as happiness that's spread to others. It's basically a sense of well-being. It's an overall contentment with one's life.
Great. And why do you think they're so important?
Well, when you think about things, we're only given a limited amount of time on Earth. Hopefully, it's a long time, but that we can't say. So, spending that time in a joyful state is a positive, good feeling, and I can't imagine spending our life being cynical and unhappy. And then there's an added bonus: when we have joy in ourself, we feel good, and this spreads to others, and it makes them feel good.
That's an excellent descriptor and a great way of doing it. And I agree. I also feel that happiness and joy are a little different from one another. I tend to think of happiness as usually being a little more short lived or a smaller version, joy being a bigger version, longer lasting. And I don't know if it's right or wrong, but I tend to think of happiness as more individual. Joy, I think, can also be individual, but can also be shared. You talked a little bit about how we can use it to improve our personal lives. How about our work lives and our interactions with colleagues? How does joy impact us there?
Well, when you think about our life, we spend a lot of our time in our workplace. So it just makes sense to be happy while we're there. When we have joy in our work, we feel connected with what we do. Work seems more meaningful, and it really gives us a feeling of success and fulfillment. I think when we have joy in our workplace, we're motivated to do our best work. We tend to take on new projects, and some of these projects can actually result in really significant career benefits. And an added bonus is when we share this joy with others, especially our patients, they're quite aware of this. They tend to do better in terms of their medication adherence, our recommendations for lifestyle changes. And when you do surveys on these patients, they're more satisfied with their healthcare experience that they've received. So there's so many benefits. Others, you get a higher morale in your workplace, a lower turnover. There's just so many things that you can benefit from having joy in the workplace.
And I do think you mentioned sharing joy. I think that joy is uniquely shareable, and that it's not like a sandwich. You know, if I share half of my sandwich with you, you get half a sandwich and I get half a sandwich. If I share joy, we double the joy. I don't have to reduce the amount that I have in order to give you some, which I think is one of the reasons why it can have such a large impact on others around us.
Yep, totally agree.
You're a busy man with a lot going on every day. How do you balance sort of the short term pleasures and gratification and satisfaction in your day with longer term fulfillment and joy?
Well, ideally, it's nice when you have both, but that doesn't always happen. In medicine, or in other careers too, you need to realize that your work is a marathon. It's not a sprint. And if you compare it to going on a vacation, the goal of that vacation is to reach the destination. That's not the goal in our work life. The joy is in the journey. That's what we should be enjoying. I attempted to retire in 2020, and I've succeeded at most things in my career, but I did not succeed at retirement. I had no idea that I was going to miss my patients, those I work with, and most importantly, working on a team to work for a common goal of making patients better. I really wanted the journey to continue. So I'm back at work. I'm working part-time, but it's the journey that I really enjoy. I teach a class on professionalism to our newly hired male physicians. As part of that class, I give them advice on things I've learned being on staff for over 40 years. And I encourage them to get some long term goals early in their career for some long term fulfillment. Know where they want to go, what they want to do during their career. And this is especially important earlier in their career because if they don't stay focused, they can so easily get distracted. I know at Mayo and other places, when we get a new physician on staff, they're approached by a lot of people. Can you help me with my research project? Can you teach a class in medical school? Can you join this committee? And we feel honored. Somebody asks that, they think I've got the skills to do this. So we tend to say yes to everyone. And it's so easy to get overcommitted. So I encourage this new staff members to be selective in what they participate in. Ask, does this project offer me an opportunity to advance my skills in order to reach my long-term goals? And if so, it may be worth pursuing. But if it really has no potential for future benefits in helping with the goals, I encourage them to decline participation on it and be very selective in what they decide to do.
You're telling me that sometimes joy comes down to saying no,
Yeah.
in reality, and that we have to do that, and I agree with you completely, and I would say a lot of it is saying no, and then the other thing is the things that you say yes to, ask, "Is it going to help fulfill your long-term goals, and is it something that I can enjoy along the way?"
Yep.
Because oftentimes, if it'll help you accomplish that long-term goal, but you're gonna be miserable for 5 to 10 years until you get there, then maybe that trade-off is not worth it. So, is there a way that you can find joy in the journey, like you mentioned, from when you commit to that thing until the final goal is realized? Can you have some joy and satisfaction along the way, I think is really important as well.
Sometimes so we don't have full control over what we do. We may be given an assignment, maybe to be on a committee that we really have no interest in. I recall very early in my career, I was assigned to be on a technology equipment committee, and we were responsible for looking at all the expenses for computers, monitors, printers, long-term storage devices. I had no interest in that. But I attended, I learned, I contributed, and I had two benefits from this. One one of the members of the committee eventually was assigned to chair a committee on something I was very interested in, and that was improving the hospital discharge of elderly patients who needed long-term care after their hospitalization. And he asked me to be on that committee with him. So it led to something good. The other thing is use everything you do as a learning experience. What I did was I observed how this committee chair ran a meeting, and he was quite good. He developed an agenda, stuck to the agenda, got everybody involved in the discussion, even the non-physician members. And I learned a lot of good traits about how to run a meeting, which I then later used in my own experience when I was asked to be chair of a committee. And you can also learn from ineffective leaders. I've had a few of those. You just learn not to incorporate some of the things they do into your life. So, always look for learning experiences. They're always around.
That's great, and I think we'll get into this a little bit more when we get into our third section about practical applications. But one of the things you're talking about here is that joy doesn't always come first.
Hmm.
And so sometimes you're in the arena, or you're doing the task, or you're on the committee, or you're doing the job, whatever it is, and your charge has to be to find joy within it.
Yep.
Yes, it's nice if you have complete control and can say yes or no and only do things you enjoy, but that's not the world most of us live in. And that we often do have to do things that on the outset may not seem like they are going to be the most fun for us, but there's almost always some joy to be found in it. So a lot of it is finding that joy within the thing, and I think that's an immense skill that many of us underestimate.
Yeah, I think being optimistic is a part of being a joyful individual. There's always something that you can find that's good in the project, even if it doesn't look like it immediately.
Well, good. Well, that's a great segue into sort of our second section, where we're going to talk about why so many of us struggle to find joy in our lives. And one of the questions I have for you, you've been at this for a little while and you've seen a lot of people. Do you think people are just born joyful? Some are born joyful and others are just born angry. So is this a nature or nurture thing?
I don't know this for sure. There may be some genetic component to it, but I doubt that. I suspect whether a person ends up joyful, happy, or angry, cynical has more to do with their environment. What were they brought up in? Was their family full of cynicism, unhappiness? You're talking about years and years of exposure to that, and it's hard not to become what you saw when you were growing up. We surround ourselves with various people, and I think we learn what we're exposed to. So I think it's more of a nurture type thing that you learn from your environment.
And in doing that, is the reverse also true? So if you're exposed to bitterness, you can take on those characteristics. But if you find ways of exposing yourself to joy, do you feel like you can actually make meaningful improvement in that way?
Yeah, I think you can. I think it takes some effort, and it's going to probably be much more difficult for an individual who grew up in an environment of frustration, cynicism, unhappiness to turn their life around and be happy and lead a joyful life. But I think we all have the capacity to change. But it does require some intentional effort on our part to do so. It just doesn't happen automatically.
What are some of the most common drains on joy that people may not recognize in their lives?
I think one of the important drains is the inability to accept or even consider change. Most of us don't like change. It can be painful, or as a minimum, at least uncomfortable. So rather than accept a change, some prefer to accept stability. And as a result, they may end up staying at a job that, they don't really enjoy all that much, or possibly stay in an unhappy relationship with another rather than make a significant change in their life. I think joyful people are more willing to take on change with somewhat of an optimistic approach that something good might be behind that door that just opened for them. I mean, I have had so many doors that have opened throughout my career. I have now learned to go through them and see what's on the other side. One of the major doors that opened for me was I was in my career about 20 years. I was doing geriatrics. That's what I was trained to do. I was asked to consider a career change in a different division. It represented a major change, and the thought of changing my practice at that time was really frightening. I was comfortable in my practice, I was good at it, and this new practice would require me to learn some new skills, and it was somewhat frightening. I did make the change. The stress level was significantly less. I'd ever appreciated that. It was one of the best decisions I ever made. It really resulted in a joy in my work that I had never experienced before.
How about the people that we surround ourselves with? So, how big of an influence do our relationships with other people contribute to our own level of joy?
I think relationships with others are one of the keys to finding joy in our life. I think we were born to be with others. Companionship is important. Um, I think if we don't have meaningful relationships, we're going to experience a lack of social support. That can lead to feelings of loneliness, isolation. Um, it's nice to have someone to share not only our problems and concerns, but also our happy moments. A good example, I thoroughly enjoy going out for a meal with one or more friends. It's just a very pleasurable experience. That same activity, going out for dinner when I'm by myself, is a very distasteful event for me. I don't enjoy it at all. So when I'm at a meeting all by myself in another, some doing some CME in another city, I more often will get some takeout, just go to my room and eat it there. I really don't enjoy that activity alone. On the other hand, with others, it's a very happy and a wonderful experience.
It's often said that we're sort of the average of the 5 people that we spend the most time in our lives, with, and so I think that if we surround ourselves with people who are joyful, not only does that give us the benefit of then we have meaningful social interactions with help which help, but we start to take on their characteristics. So if they tend to be bitter, cynical people, we're gonna lean towards being bitter and cynical, but if they tend to be joyful, happy people, we're gonna lean in that direction as well.
Totally agree. I think the environment you surround yourself in plays such a role in how you turn out.
So you're a physician, you've been taking care of patients for a long time. What role do you think physical health plays in joy?
Staying healthy is an important component to remaining happy. There are events that happen regarding our health at random. Rheumatoid arthritis, multiple sclerosis, nothing we can do to prevent them. And when we're left with chronic diseases, debilitating diseases, it's difficult, but not impossible to remain joyful in our life. A very good friend of mine became paraplegic very early in his life. Yet he is an incredible, inspiring example of gratitude towards others and shares joy with essentially all those he touches. Uh, Fortunately, much of the health issues have a preventive component. So, by engaging in these preventive strategies, we can reduce the risk of developing some of these problems, heart disease, stroke, even malignancy. It includes avoiding unhealthy habits such as smoking or drinking to excess, getting regular exercise, following a healthy diet, getting adequate sleep. All of these things work toward a healthy work life balance. I try to walk at least 5 miles a day and I eat a healthy diet. I know one of my goals for this winter was to lose 20 pounds. Well, winter's almost over, and as a result of my hard work, I've only got 25 pounds to go, but I'm
It's
still
it's still
trying.
winter in some parts of the world, though.
I keep thinking that. You're right.
You've got time. But you make a great point, and really focusing on the controllables, I think is really important. And oftentimes we focus a lot on the things we can't control, which is usually not helpful or healthy for us and can actually work to decrease our joy. But I think if we can think about the things we can control, which is usually our sleep, our nutrition, our exercise, and we make some forward progress in those will make us physically healthier. They'll put us in a better position to be more joyful. And we can take some pride and satisfaction in that process of improving in those things, which I think can also be joyful.
Yep.
So, we live in a busy, connected world. Social media is all over the place. How do you think that this increased connectivity in social media has impacted joy for us?
Boy, I think social media has had both a positive and negative impact on our lives. In terms of the good it's done, it's given us a very easy way to connect with our friends and colleagues. Those who we don't see very often, we can still stay in touch with them, share our interests. In our work, we can network with others who have similar interests, promote professional development. Educationally, it helps us stay on top of current developments in our field. We're able to access the latest educational content very easily. On the negative side, it's easy for us to spend a lot of time on social media, and it really can be addicting. And as a result, it can reduce the amount of time we spend in face to face interactions with others, which is also very important. And the other thing we need to realize that we use social media a lot in obtaining information regarding our career. We need to make sure that what we're reading and accessing is accurate. Looking at social media in general for society, it really frightens me. There are so many people in our population who accept what they see and hear as the truth, when in fact there's really a lot of misinformation out there, and that is really frightening.
And I think also contributes to stress and burnout and everything else. It's interesting if we think about all the long term or longitudinal studies that have been done on human happiness and joy, a few common factors keep rising to the top. And the things that really seem to fulfill us tend to be meaningful interpersonal relationships that are real and with live human beings, fulfilling our purpose and carrying out our meanings and values, and making progress towards goals. And I think that all those things can contribute to joy. But one of the ways social media has sort of hurt us a little bit in that some of those real genuine social interactions that we have switched to being online. Now, not to say that you can't have meaningful relationships and social interactions online, but I think we're just less likely to do so. So I do think that's an important watch out for people as it pertains specifically to joy. So we're going to transition sort of into the third section where we're actually going to talk about solutions and answers for people, things they can start putting into practice. But before we do that, I have one other question I want to ask you. What is a reasonable expectation for people around joy? So, how much joy is it right for me to expect or strive for? Am I supposed to be happy all the time, or how can I set an appropriate goal?
Well, wouldn't it be wonderful to be happy all the time? And that's just not reasonable to happen. We all experience difficult times in our lives. Stresses come up. There's loss of friends or loved ones. We just can't be happy all the time. However, when we lead a joyful life, it does help us get through some of these life's challenges. I think we've also shown that we have greater resilience when we've got joy in our life dealing with these challenges that come up in all of our lives. You just can't avoid them.
So let's transition into this third section. We're going to talk a little bit about how we can intentionally design our lives to experience more joy and hopefully make joy the default for each of us. So, do you feel that we all have the ability to actually improve our joy? And if so, what sort of mindset does one need to be successful in this?
I think we all have the ability to improve the joy in our life, but it's not going to happen automatically. It really requires some intention on our part to do so. It requires a definite effort. But the first step is we need to decide we want to do this. We take the necessary steps that it requires, realizing that it's going to take some time and the progress is going to be gradual. It involves setting meaningful goals along the journey, both in our personal and our professional life. It's a good idea to engage in experiences that make us happy, give us fulfillment. Practice healthy behaviors. We've talked a little bit about that. It's important to give back to others. We haven't talked much about gratitude, but that is extremely important. And then, as we did mention, surround yourself with other positive people, and you'll think things will improve.
Okay, how about for the cynics out there who say, I don't have time to work on this? What would you say to somebody who says, I'm too busy to work on improving my joy?
Well, First of all, I'd feel sorry for that individual. I guess we all need to determine the priorities in our life, but I just can't imagine anything more depressing than having a lifetime full of unhappiness. Um, you do have to set aside a certain amount of time every day. But with time, it eventually becomes part of your daily routine, and then it becomes part of your lifestyle. So it's not that you have to physically think about it anymore. It's just something that you do.
And I also want to be careful here. What about somebody who's dealing with maybe chronic stress or clinical depression? Is that something that they have to fix first before they can start working on their joy, or can they do both sort of simultaneously?
Well, let's first talk about stress because I think the two are completely different. Um, Stress, it really depends on the source of the stress, and you need to look at that. Some stress is really unavoidable, like we mentioned, living with the chronic disease. And it really requires a special person to remain joyful living with that kind of stress, but it's not impossible. If chronic stress is part of our life, we need to look carefully at where this stress is coming from, and then first determine if it's temporary. Can we expect a change in the near future, or does it have no foreseeable end? And if this is part of our career, um, if it's temporary, we may choose to accept it knowing that better times are coming. But if we don't see anything in the horizon that looks like the stress is going to change, I encourage those individuals to look closely at what they're doing and decide if this is really something they want to do long term, because chronic stress can really wear you down and it causes other problems, can lead to a variety of mental health issues. Now, depression, that's another issue. Clinical depression can sneak up on people. And it's really almost impossible to feel joy when you're clinically depressed. But, feelings of sadness, loss of interests, difficulty sleeping, lack of appetite, those are all symptoms of depression. And it's a health problem. And the good news is it's treatable once it's recognized. And there is very effective treatment now for managing depression. But we first need to recognize the symptoms, then get the help that's available.
Now, what if I say, I want to improve my joy, but I don't want to be selfish about this? I'm an altruistic person. How do I balance my effort in taking care of myself and improving my own joy versus giving back to others and improving their joy?
I don't think you need to separate the two. I think that the first results in the second. When you lead a joyful life, you share that joy, you share that happiness with others. Others see your happiness, it gives them a positive feeling. Just seeing others happy, again, feeds back on yourself, makes you happy as well.
Yeah, so it goes in both directions. I think
Mhm.
when you're more joyful and happier, it then allows you to do more for others. And when you do something for others, you can share in that joy as well. So I agree. Don't separate them. And it's a two-way street. It both can be synergistic and helpful. Well, give us some warning. So once I commit to improving my joy, what barriers should I expect and look out for on my pathway to becoming a more joyful human?
Well, I can speak to this as a healthcare provider because it's easy to get distracted in our field. Multiple challenges come up every year. I can't remember a year that we weren't told we're going to have to either see more patients or in some way become more productive. We may be asked to give more documentation. We're getting a new electronic medical record. You're going to have to learn how to use it. Maybe it's just my age, but the patients seem to be getting more challenging every year. And these challenges, after a while, can lead to feelings of pessimism, cynicism, and we stand the risk of having these things erode the joy in our life. Another thing we tend to do is we tend to compare ourselves to others, and we really need to stop doing this. Uh, we see our colleagues, maybe they've got more publications than we do. Maybe they just got a funded research project. Maybe they just won a teaching award. Um, Comparing yourself to others can lead to frustration, self criticism, envy, and then eventually self doubt. And then third, I think we need to stop trying to pursue us achieving perfection. Um, as healthcare providers, that's a good goal. I mean, we don't want to make mistakes. We want to do the best for our patients, but we're not perfect. We're human. Mistakes happen. It's only a problem when we don't learn from our mistakes. So don't be afraid to try something and do it incorrectly. Just the goals that we have that are never achieved are missed opportunities.
So, in this next question, I'm going to get a little personal, maybe ask you to be
Mhm.
vulnerable here. But for somebody with such a wealth of experience like yourself, I mean, you've worn many hats over the course of your career, often at the same time. So you've had a lot to balance and you've had a lot to juggle. And even in retirement, semi non retirement, you still have that going on. So I want to hear from you in your experience. What are the things you're doing in your life that have made you a more joyful person?
Well, I'm going to share with you what I share with our new staff when I teach that professionalism class, because this is one of the topics that I cover. I try to give them, my experience in 40 plus years of being a physician and things I wish I'd known back in their life. First, relationships with others, extremely important. And I think one of the most important aspects of leading a joyful and happy life. I have someone in my life I'm very close to. I'm comfortable sharing both good times and challenges that I struggle with. I feel gratitude when I receive help, and it's good to have someone listen to me. And that brings up the second point. You need to be a good listener. Um, you may not always have the answer to another person's problem, but they may not want an answer from you. They may just want someone to listen to them as they describe a challenging situation for them. And this really helps strengthen a relationship. This holds true with our patients too. We tend to interrupt our patients after they've been speaking for less than a minute. We rarely let them speak for fear that they're going to go on and we're going to be running late. But we really need to spend more time listening to our patients. It really helps us get a better understanding of what they're going through and what they're trying to tell us. The third thing is I've learned to look at new opportunities that present as a positive experience. It may represent some change, and as we mentioned earlier, change can be uncomfortable and sometimes difficult. But I've had so many different experiences that have presented to me. And then once I pursued them, it turned out to be an extremely positive experience. Some of them completely life changing. The next thing is, I think it's important to discover very early in your career your areas of interest. What do you want to do? What's your passion? I discovered early in my life, actually, I was probably in high school, my passion was teaching. I was very fortunate that I had several teachers that I really looked up to, and I wanted to be like them. So, my goal when I was in high school was to teach seventh or eighth grade math or science. Fortunately, back in high school, we met with a counselor periodically, and they went over, our career choices and guided us when necessary. And they asked me what I want to do, and I said I want to be a teacher. Well, back in the '70s, teachers were abundant. There were very, very few jobs, and I was told that if I went into teaching, I'd probably end up in some small town doing substitute teaching for years. So they said, "What else would you like to do?" I says, "Well, I'd like to go into radio broadcasting." Well, that met with some hysterical laughter. And they said, "You're going to go broke. There's no money in that. You can't make a living doing that." So my wise counselor said, "Your grades are pretty good in math and science. How about medicine?" So I said, "Okay, I'll try that." So I basically went into medicine as a third choice, but it was a very good decision. From medicine, I was able to follow my passion of teaching. And I was even able to host the Mayo Clinic Talks podcast. So I got my desire to do radio broadcasting as well. So it's really important to identify your areas of interest early in your career. Next, I think variety in our work is important. One of the things I teach our new staff members is I encourage them to have some variety in their work. Don't do the same thing day after day, month after month, year after year. I think it really leads to a much longer and happier career when you can add some other tasks to your work, not just, if you're just seeing patients, get involved in some teaching, get involved in a research project, but some variety in your life. And I really think that leads to a longer, happier career. And then finally, practice gratitude on a daily basis. Um, as physicians, we get a lot of recognition and thanks. Most of our patients thank us at the end of our visit. Unfortunately, those we work with often don't get this kind of recognition. So I make it a point that at the end of each workday, I make my what I call gratitude rounds. I go to the desk. I thank those who helped me get through the day. In many cases, I may have a podcast recording over the noon hour, and I ask them to help me be as efficient as possible in getting the morning done by noon. So they've got my next patient roomed by the time I'm done with my last one. I go into the nurse's office and thank them for doing my orders for me. I go into a medical secretary and thank her for doing my letters for me. Just a little bit of gratitude goes so far, and you can just see their face light up when they get some degree of appreciation for the help that they do.
That's a wonderful list, and I appreciate you sharing that with us. And that, I mean, in a lot of ways, that list sort of details your journey over the last 40 years as well, because I've had the opportunity to see you do so many of these things firsthand. So I know you're speaking from experience, and this is true wisdom. Well, now let's take that and help others start to apply it.
Okay.
And so I want to kind of lay out a roadmap for our audience on how they can become more joyful. So help us get started. Where should people start? Once they say, okay, I want to work on this, I need to get a little bit better. What's step number one, in your opinion?
Well, you can't just tell people, be happy. It doesn't work that way. So I would recommend something very concrete, something very specific. And I would tell somebody to spend a few minutes each day, generally early in the morning when you first get up, practicing gratitude. Think of several things that you're grateful for. Appreciate the components of your life. And then make it a specific point to each day be kind to others, actively help at least one other person, or perform some act of kindness to another. The greatest joy you can experience is doing something kind for somebody else, especially when it was done with no expectation that you're going to receive anything in return. The second thing I would recommend is spend some quality time with good friends and family, sharing good times you've had during the day, but also talking about any challenges that have come up. Invite one of your colleagues during the day to share a cup of coffee. Invite one of your friends to have lunch together. It's really important to spend time with positive individuals, and then also look at those that you're hanging around with. If a lot of those are negative people, it's best to really avoid spending a lot of time with them, because again, it's the environment that you immerse yourself in, and that's what you're going to turn out like. I encourage each person to spend a portion of each day doing something they really enjoy. Hopefully we each have a hobby or two, maybe listening to or playing music. Maybe it's painting, maybe it's reading, but something that we enjoy doing. Healthy habits, practice healthy habits. Change your diet, look at it closely. Is it nutritious? Are you getting adequate exercise? I encourage my patients to walk. I've had so many who get into some real vigorous exercise program and then tear an ACL or tear a meniscus. So I encourage them to walk. I recommend 30 minutes a day. I try to walk 5 miles a day. It's challenging when I'm working, but it's a lot easier when I'm off work. I encourage individuals to find out what they're passionate about and then set meaningful goals for the future. And then it's important to periodically review those goals. And they should be achievable goals. Now, it's fine for each of us to have extremely high goals. Otherwise we're never going to have any astronauts or Broadway theater actors. One of my high level goals was to be a pitcher for the Minnesota Twins. I've finally given up on that as thought that's probably not going to happen. Although I have not yet given up on the fact that I could be quarterback for the Vikings. I mean, after their last playoff game, I think I still have a shot at that. So I'm not giving up on
There
that
may
one
be an
yet.
opening soon. Yeah.
I'm thinking. So, but most of your goals should be somewhat achievable, and then you should periodically review your goals. Sometimes things change. One of my high-level goals when I first started medicine was to become dean of the Mayo Medical School. I learned mid-career, yeah, it's probably not going to happen. So I transitioned. I modified the goal, and I saw that associate dean of the School of Continuous Professional Development was within my reach. So, modified the goal and I was able to achieve it. Start small, changes that are easily manageable, gradually build on them, appreciate the little things in your life. When you hear a favorite song, stop and look at a beautiful sunset, listen to a good joke, be patient with yourself. Don't expect results immediately, but do look for gradual progress. And the other thing that's important, live in the present and let go of the past. We haven't talked about forgiveness, but I think that is so important. If you don't forgive somebody for something wrong they did, you're just hanging on to that anger and it can eat away at you. So practice forgiveness for others in terms of what they did. Let go of the past. Look at the immediate present and then the future, but get rid of the past. And then keep your relationships with others strong. I think they're really the key to your success.
Well, that's an excellent list. I mean, some of them are bigger and more challenging, but some of those are very straightforward and
Yeah.
very easy and very small. And I think James Clear who said that everything you do or decision you make or action you take, you're casting a vote for the type of person you want to become. And I think even in these small ways, you do something really small. You say thank you, you're appreciative, you demonstrate gratitude, you spend a little more time doing something you enjoy. Not only are you enjoying that moment, but you're casting a vote for the more joyful identity of yourself. You're helping turn yourself into that person, even with these small things. So I think that that can be immensely helpful. And also in there, you talked about how it's a continued process, and I think that this is one of those things where you never look up and say, "Okay, good, I'm done. I'm joyful enough. I don't need to do this. I don't need to be joyful anymore." It is an iterative process, so that you have to enjoy that journey. There isn't necessarily a destination or a finish line we're striving for. It's the process along the way that we have to enjoy. Is that fair to say?
Yep. It's the journey. Getting to the end is not the goal. I mean, I guess that is a goal, but the happy part is enjoying the journey. And you
Agreed.
mentioned a quote, and one of my favorite quotes, and I've tried to figure out who said this. I was unable to, but this is one of my favorite quotes about joy. Find joy in everything you choose to do, every job, every relationship. It's your responsibility to love it or change it.
I love it. I love it. That's fantastic. Well, Daryl, this has been a phenomenal segment, and I really appreciate you taking the time and letting us learn from your wisdom and your experience. And I'd kind of like to summarize my big learning points. I've been taking notes as we go, and I've taken a lot away from what you've talked about. So, we talked about the benefits of joy, which I think most people understand are obvious, but I think you did a great job of giving us some really practical things that we can do and some key areas to focus on that you listed that you've done for yourself and things that others can do is really focus on your relationships with others and make sure that they're high quality relationships, particularly people who embody those characteristics that you want to embody. Be a good listener. This is something that we can all improve on, and it's easy. You can practice that thousands of times a day. Look at new opportunities or look for the positive experiences in new opportunities. And you mentioned that joy is something that often you have to find. It may not be readily apparent to you. It may not be obvious. It may not come wrapped in a big bow and somebody sit on your lap. But if you look for it, you can find it in every situation. And if you can't, then change the situation. Identify your areas of interest early on, keep variety in your work, and really practice gratitude. Those were some of the big take homes that I had for me. And now, for you to summarize, I'm going to give you a chance to answer those three big questions directly. So we've kind of hit all of them over the course of this session, but let me ask you directly. So, our first big question: how do you define joy and happiness, and how do they play a role in our everyday lives?
I think joy is an expression of happiness shared with others. And I think we all need to strive for that, both in our personal lives, in our work lives, because we spend so much time in our workplace.
And our second big question: why do so many of us struggle with finding joy in our lives, and how is that impacting us?
I think many have lived in an environment of unhappiness, cynicism, frustration, doubt, and we learn what we've experienced. Those who have had an environment of a very positive upbringing, lots of humor, lots of support, have found it much easier to lead a happy and joyful life. So I think we learn what we've grown up around.
And how can we intentionally design our lives and work to experience more joy and make joy our default?
There are some very simple things that you can do, but it has to be intentional. You have to want to do it. It just doesn't happen by itself. But, starting out small, start with gratitude, expand from there. Once you share your happiness with others, it's going to feed back on you and make you even a more joyful person.
So now we'll get into our call of action here, the challenge. As you know, one of the things we value here on the Human Optimization Project is turning your passive learning into active learning. So we want to try to help you take the first step. So make it very simple, help you get an easy win. What I would encourage you to do after listening to this content: get out a sheet of paper and write down the following. List 5 things that you're grateful for. Then list 5 things that you enjoy doing, and then list 5 things that you don't enjoy doing or that bother you or cause you stress or anxiety. And I would encourage you to read through the list of the 5 things that you're grateful for. Read through that every day. On the list of 5 things that you enjoy, circle one of those things that you think you could easily increase in your life. And then on the 5 things that you don't like or that are stealing from your joy, see if there's one of those that you could eliminate or reduce in your life. Either you delegate it, you get rid of it, you move on, or you choose to look at it a different way and try to find the joy in it. So that's your challenge and your homework after listening to today's session. Well, okay, optimizers, there you have it. Dr. Daryl Chukka just did a phenomenal job walking us through this session. The title was Moving from Stress to Joy: How to Cultivate Happiness and Joy at Work and at Home. Dr. Chukka, we really appreciate your time and giving us a chance to learn from your extensive wisdom on this topic. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you so much for inviting me. It's been an honor.
To our audience, thank you for joining us. Remember to always live intentionally, consistently better. Keep striving to be the best human you can be and never stop optimizing.